Hey guys, I spent my time obsessively watching the final scenes of the gameplay, slowing it down and freezing the frame to get a better look at the villains that unquestionably threaten Thedas in Dragon Age the Veilguard. I mean the escaped Elven gods Ghilan'nain and Elgar'nan, and today we will investigate the former, analyze Ghilan'nain's character using the existing lore, the revealed look and her professional legacy, so to speak. Oh, she's truly a monster. And honestly, I think she was insane before she ascended to godhood. And she doesn't play the last part in killing Mythal. As you can remember, Solus created the Veil after
They killed Mythal.
We know that codex pages often contradict each other, especially when it comes to Elven myths and legends. Instead of accusing BioWare writers of sloppiness, let's look at this from my point of view. Everything is true, and there is no mistake. The codex pages are a legitimate source of information because I have seen the exact pattern in the real world. Propaganda and smear campaigns found in the Shattered Library in Trespasser would explain why the elves are unaware of their true history and why Fen'Harel and the Forgotten Ones are bad guys. The Evanuris enslaved their people. Why wouldn't they dictate what the elves must think too? I know a couple of countries that do this nowadays. Propaganda is the root of the conflicting duality of the gods. In one version, Ghilan'nain appears as a beautiful elven huntress with white hair and graceful steps in her every move. In the other, she is a true believer and her devotion led her to godhood. Both stories tell us about a beautiful, gentle soul who loved animals, hunting, and was rewarded by Andrael. Considering the legend where Andrael turned her into the first Hala and therefore she is called the mother of Hala, she's practically a Disney princess. But she's not. The other stories are rather different and show more truth as we find them in the Temple of Mythal. This is important to remember that Mythal followers left the pages for us to discover in Dragon Age Inquisition. Ghilan'nain was a mortal elf with the power to create beasts even before her ascension. She isolated herself from the people and bred all kinds of monsters that she allegedly made to honor Andrael, the goddess of the hunt. Andrael, for whatever reason there was, offered Ghil, I will call her Ghil for short, offered Ghil to become a god and to share the Evanuris' power, but only if she destroyed her beasts. A lovely creature, isn't it? Thus, she became the youngest of the gods, and the only creatures left in the world were Halas, something that can fly, probably hawk, because that's the most favorite Andrael's bird, and the deep water sea monsters, because Pride stopped her hand. There is a theory that Pride with a capital P refers to a person whose name is translated from Elvish. If you didn't know, Solus means pride. Therefore, Ghilan'nain, as a mortal, met not one but two ancient elven mages. Her powers were truly exceptional, not only to be noticed by the gods, but also to make them plot and overrule each other's decisions. His crime is high treason. He took on a form reserved for the gods and their chosen, and dared to fly in the shape of the divine. The sinner claims he took wings at the urging of Ghilan'nain. Whether Ghil was incredibly creative or not, she began acting like an insane genius, abusing the power of the Evanuris, their resources, and their impunity, which had no limits. In Dragon Age Inquisition, we find a unique item set called the Taken Shape. It includes the story of its creation and subtly refers to Ghilan'nain as its creator. We can deduce that Ghil experimented with enchantments using living creatures to create armor, belts, rings, and amulets. The leather of this armor gives off a faint living heat. The stitching, while fine, is of a strange thin thread that resembles hair and can't be cut with even the sharpest knife. The gem in the center contains a liquid that glows a sluggish red in bright light. The ring grows unusually warm when slipped into a finger. It pulses slightly and steadily, as if in time with the wearer's heartbeat. If we have a closer look at Ghilan'nain's movement, we can see that her body moves as if she was a snake. You can also see a tiny bit of a thingy, I don't know what it's called, but it resembles this screenshot, which shows us that Ghilan'nain is actually a creature herself, and probably it happened because of many experiments during her career. My next step was to examine the textures and the light. If you can see her horns, that they must be horns, but I can see that they are of an organic nature because the light reflects differently from metal surfaces and, for example, skin. So try to compare what you see when you look at her hands and her horns, and you can actually notice that they kind of have the same texture, while the other god and Solus, they have somewhat of a metallic glistening on the surface of their armor, and we can for 100% say that they wear metal while her horns are covered with skin. The other thing that made me a bit is the kind of tentacles that you can notice from that connected to her back. I don't understand the purpose of it, but this shit is scary. It looks exactly like the mural that we saw at one of the concept arts, and she doesn't look like a lovely elven princess. Remember how I almost cried because of the cartoon trailer? Something doesn't add up. I mean, this and this don't belong together. God, I hate this trailer. Ghil is an embodiment of all nightmares, and after reading a story from Tevinter Nights a couple of years ago, it seemed obvious that we would face Ghilan'nain or her monsters in the next game. The story hints that our future adventure will be quite chilling. I thought Ghilan'nain was out of her mind before, but the horror of Hormak's story blew my mind. Apparently, Ghil grew bored of playing with animals and switched to elves. If you don't want to know what happened in the horror of Hormak, skip to the next chapter. Hormak is one of many dwarven thaigs that people think were lost forever. But reading the story proved that the situation is a little bit different. I'm going to quote some parts from the story that I find crucial for you to understand what Ghilan'nain truly is. There was something different about these darkspawn. The mutations that gave rise to their mindless hordes were far from consistent. Yet here he saw variants unlike any he'd previously known. Harlocks with extra arms, shrieks with the powerful legs of a Genlock, and an emissary with a second head. 9 darkspawn. Yet, where their entrance would normally be marked by gibbering and jabbering, these were eerily silent. They were changed, different. One Harlock had the tail of a scorpion, another a Genlock, but with a longer, thinner skull. The Harlock that they'd seen earlier breathed a jet of fire. Blank rock gave way to carvings, mostly too worn and damaged to make out. It was a simple painting of 3 figures, a supplicant, a priestess, and a monster. The next picture showed that the creature changed a bit each time, as did the figure, but the priestess remained the same, or at least almost the same. It seemed that the priestess' smile grew a little wider and a little crueler with each subsequent image. There was no question that these ruins were elven in nature. While dwarven architecture remained the rule in the deep roads, there were exceptions. From time to time, wardens would find unmistakably elven architecture scattered among dwarven works. This, however, was exclusively, entirely Elven. There were no dwarven works. The images engraved into the stone seemed almost alive, each one a perfectly frozen moment as the actors within marched through their stories. On the topmost band, stately elven kings and queens held court, their people kneeling before them in respectful supplication. On the middle, scenes of healing and succor of disease and injury being drawn forth from the sick and dying by elven mages. And on the bottom, Aravels, far more elaborate and grandiose than any that Ramesh had ever seen, pulled by armies of Hala toward distant mountains, one of which, he realized with a start, was that same mountain that they were now beneath. The columns, random at first, began to form patterns before Ramesh's eyes. The same symbol, the horns of Hala, repeated on each column. The lowest band of carvings, the Hala pulling the Aravel, was off. The Hala were different, wrong. They had too many horns for one and a harder, more rounded look than was normal. A look that was almost insectile. And the horns themselves were longer and rigged, organic somehow. And the Aravels were unlike any he had seen. The windows were barred, and they bore more resemblance to a prison ship than anything else. The middle band, with its scenes of healing, seemed now twisted, wrong. No longer did it seem as though mages were drawing corruption and disease out of the wounded and infirm, but instead they forced it in, pushing it through and into the fallen bodies. The expressions on the faces of those elven rulers betrayed a contempt that was almost palpable. Each one was a twisted horror of body parts assembled seemingly at random. The fanged maw of a serpent rested atop the slender neck of a Hala, moving rapidly on the limbs of a Verteral. A massive spider scurried around, its many eyes replaced instead with the heads of a dozen serpents, each one dripping venom from exposed fangs. And in the center, a massive pool filled with a viscous grey fluid. The scent of brine wafted forth from it. Above it, a massive lyrium crystal hung suspended. It glowed with a sickly light, yellow and green. Streamers of energy flowed from it into the pool, sending it bubbling wherever it touched. They watched as a Harlock walked toward the pool, stiff-legged. Yet what came out was not a Harlock. It was the head of one, but that head rested on the body of a massive drake. Warden Jovis, from the waist up, but bloated, grotesque, and his flesh flowed into that of a massive centipede. The lyrium, blow it up, take this place down, collapse the entrance. So we're finding out that probably in the Veilguard we are going to deal not only with the typical blue lyrium but also with the red lyrium and green lyrium. I suppose that green lyrium has connection to the fate and therefore it concentrates magic or channels it or focuses it. The story of Hormak gives us some insight of how lyrium could have been used before. And when it comes to the experiments that allegedly Ghilan'nain held in this vague, well, what is the best medicine if not death, right? It was a joke. The game gets creepier with every second. Or should I say it transforms into something new. Mutates even. I know that most people just talk about character creators right now. Seriously, I don't find it fascinating when it comes to this game because we've already seen many examples such as Dragon Dogma 2 or Baldur's Gate that character creator evolved as a tool and you can do a lot of things there that, well, I don't know, maybe I'm just spoiled again and it's not surprising. But what is surprising is how BioWare uses awful marketing to cover for a really cool story and potential bosses and monsters that we're going to meet in the Tevinter Imperium. I must say that researching Ghilan'nain again, because I forgot a lot of things about her for the past years, brought some hope, and I can say for sure that my skepticism, okay, whatever. So I'm not as conflicted as I used to be. Probably some of you will find it as a betrayal. But you know what? There is nothing wrong in being able to have a look at the problem from different points of view. And this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm a researcher, and I'm simply examining the new baby of BioWare. Okay, let's start the discussion. So, what do you think about Ghilan'nain and the lore that's hidden behind her figure, her persona? And what do you think about green lyrium, its potential purpose, and how many mutated species and monsters we're going to see in the next game? Have fun, play video games, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!